Hello, Robs. We're back with Shakespeare's Sweetheart, chapter 12. 12. Love given unsought. The hell does that mean? Love given unsought. The Countess, by no other name did I ever know her, then or afterwards, but sooth I should have instinctively given her noble title. No coronet was needed upon those lustrousness raven tresses, no sceptre in those white taper fingers to proclaim her right of sway. As I entered the room, in response to the bidding of the lazy, scornful voice that I so well remembered, I saw her seated by the window on a heap of yellow cushions. She was dressed in thinnest silk that clung around her figure, revealing its perfect, glorious curves. Her robe was flame-colored, and as she sat there, blood-red against the light, she seemed to me some baleful spirit incarnate. I had found the page, as Will had said, and had followed him to a stately house in a fine street. Through many corridors, up many staircases, we had gone together, without speech, and meeting no one, until at last we stood before a certain closed door. Here the page told me to knock. I obeyed, and in reply the Countess's voice graciously bade me enter. Now at last I stood in her presence. There was a half-mocking look in her eyes as I came in. But when she saw me, she started slightly and sat erect. An attendant was fanning her. With an imperious gesture, she bade her cease. "Whence comest thou?" she asked, and her dark eyes searched my face, as if she would read it through. They wore an expression that I could not fathom. "From Will Shakespeare," I answered. My voice was low and trembling, for at sight of her the remembrance of the time when I had last beheld her came over me like a destroying flood. A smile, scornful, triumphant, just crossed her face and was gone. So have I seen the evil lightning illumine for an instant the dark and stormy sky. That radiance is not a cheerful nor a holy light. She threw herself back among the cushions. "Wherefore?" she drawled lazily, her eyes still fixed upon my face. Her indifference angered me. I knew so well what Will's love meant that I burned with sudden rage at her apparent lack of feeling. "Wherefore?" I repeated defiantly, and I felt my face flush warmly. Because, in sooth, he loves thee, madam." "Doth he so?" she said, smothering a yawn, and she motioned to her woman to begin fanning her again. "The tale is somewhat old, Sir Page. Hast nothing newer to delight mine ears?" I gasped with rage. "An old tale, truly, madam," I answered, fingering my cap with agitated, angry hands. "An old tale, but sweet to any save a tigress gloating o'er her prey." She laughed outright. Her very merriment had a scornful ring. She lifted a fold of her red robe and let it fall again. "So tigers have crimson coats," she said, and the lazy amusement in her voice goaded me to the last pitch of exasperation. "Thy knowledge of animals needs addition, little page." "I know not of their coats," I answered immediately, for my hatred of her seemed to spur my wits. "I know not of their outside seeming, but good sooth, madam, I can discern a tiger's heart." She looked at me in silence for an instant, and her gloomy, inscrutable eyes seemed to reach my very soul. The laughter was gone out of her face. "So," she said at last suddenly, "where didst get thy knowledge, boy, thou a mere child? Art Will Shakespeare's messenger?" She made no pause between her first question and her last, and indeed the former words seemed rather to herself than to me. "Ay, madam," I answered, "I am his messenger, and soothly an easy thing it was for me to reach thee." "And why, little page?" she said in a softer tone than she had yet used. "Ah, madam, dost need to ask?" I replied. "Dost not know that love hath wings?" She leaned forward with sudden, curious eagerness. "And was it love that brought thee hither?" she said in a low, passionate voice. Ay, madam, I said again, Will Shakespeare's love inspired me. His love brought me hither. And even as the words passed my lips, I realized how bitterly true they were. She sighed and sat an instant in deep thought. I remained silent also, and during that quiet moment, a strange and sudden resolution seized me. Why the singular determination came to me, I never knew, but true it is that then and there I resolved to play my part. To plead Will's cause as it were my own, I would show this cruel enchantress what manner of man it was that she flouted. I would win her for him, if I could. 'Twas all that was left me to do for him. What was my life now that he loved me no longer? Thou speakest well, little page, the countess said at length, rousing from her reverie. So well that it pleases me to hear thee further. Leave us, Margaret. The woman cast a glance of surprise, first at her mistress, then at me, but she did as she was told. Laying down the fan, she bowed to the countess and left the room quickly and silently. Ah, said the countess when she was gone, now we can talk with more freedom. Come nearer, little page, and sit by me. She moved over a little and made an inviting gesture to a place beside her on the cushions. Nay, madam, I said, not such my place of right, but here at thy feet. I am love's messenger, and love is ever humble. I moved forward and knelt beside her. Sooth, I could not have seated myself where she indicated, although not for the reason I gave. I feared lest the scorn and loathing I felt for her would overwhelm me in such close proximity. So be it then, said the countess with a curious look. Did I dream it, or was there truly a strange new softness in her voice? Thy name? Cesario, I said. Cesario and thy servant, madam. Cesario, she repeated, and then again, Cesario, Cesario, in a voice that was liquid music. Ah, heavens, what divine melody it was to hear her speak. No wonder that those siren notes drew forth men's hearts to rest with gladness beneath her cruel feet. Thou sayest thou art my servant, she went on after a moment, and her voice was low and sweet, with no trace in it of mockery nor scorn. It's sooth, art thou verily my servant, Cesario? Will Shakespeare's servant, madam, and therefore thine, I replied, perplexed by her tone and manner. Ah, yes, I had forgot, she said, with a gesture of impatience. Well, thou comest from him, thou hast said. Speak on. I come on a quest, madam, I replied. He sent me hither for a packet that thou didst promise him. She looked at me, unheeding and frowning, thoughtful fashion. Thou sayest he loves me, she said suddenly. So I think yet. Is he worthy of my love? Worthy, I repeated angrily. Worthy, madam. There dwells not the woman on earth who is worthy of him. Nay, not even the Queen's Majesty. Thou pleadst well, Cesario, she observed, and I saw her eyes narrow in the curious cat-like way I remembered well. Thou pleadst well, but I have heard. Art from the country? Madam, I replied, wondering at what point she aimed. Hast known Will Shakespeare long, she asked, looking at me keenly. For a moment I was scared most mightily. Should I lie or not? Woman's wits are keen. Was possible she guessed my sex? I replied cautiously at length. We lived in the same neighborhood. Oh, brave, she exclaimed with sudden animation. Once more she leaned forward and fixed her eyes intently upon my face. Now shall I learn that which I have long desired to know. Has Shakespeare a deserted sweetheart in Stratford town? Suddenly, directly, the question was put to me. I stood a moment in a quandary. Indeed, should I tell all, betray him, save myself, or should I choose the nobler part? In a flash, my decision was made. I strove to make my voice careless as I answered, Nay, 'tis not true. Will Shakespeare hath been always well beloved among both men and maids. His name hath been coupled off with various lasses' names, especially with one. I paused, and my voice broke a little. With whom he once went Maine. I am sure now that he never loved her. She shot a quick glance at me from under her long lashes. Thy voice trembles, she said abruptly. Art sorry for her? Madam, I answered gently, and my traitor voice would tremble still. For I knew her, and I am sure that she loved him, even to the breaking of her heart. Natheless, that was no fault of Will's, I added hastily. Nay, 'tis woman's way, said the Countess with a tinge of bitterness in her voice. Cesario, thou lovest thy master well. She paused a moment, then continued abruptly, Dost love no other, boy? I stared at her in sudden, horrified comprehension. She rose and came towards me, and for the first time I noticed that we were of a height. Cesario, she murmured, again in the tone of low, beguiling music. Cesario, dost love no other, lad? Dear lad? Still too dismayed to speak, I stood without moving. Cesario, she went on, and I swear her spoken words were sweeter than those that others sing. Cesario, thou hast pled well thy master's cause. How rarely couldst thou present thy own? Dost love no woman, boy? She was close beside me. The perfume of her garments made my senses reel. She swayed her lissome body towards me, and her smoldering eyes sought to draw forth my soul. What good angel gave me voice and words to answer her, I know not, but I spoke as by inspiration. I love already, Countess. I love one of my master's favor. She paused at my reply, and the jealous rage that clouded her beauty was horrible to see. But how, she whispered hoarsely, putting her hand on my arm, how dost thou love her? Couldst not love more truly one like me? I made no reply, and she hurried on eagerly, entreatingly. Many men have sought to win my heart, Cesario, but all have I denied. I have sworn never to be conquered, because once, long ago, well, 'tis an old story, and I will not tell it thee. But now I have met my master. O Cesario, have mercy, I love thee. The packet, madam, I repeated mechanically, and I stayed her as she would have knelt at my feet. 'Tis thine, she answered, and she began to unloose a chain from about her neck. 'Tis thine, she repeated, and she drew forth from her bosom a miniature set with pearls and laid it in my hands. Remember, 'tis not Will Shakespeare's, but thine. Many have sought the bauble. Behold how freely I give it thee. How wilt thank me? Madam, thus, I answered, bending to kiss the hand that I had bestowed the favor. Thus I thank thee, and take my leave, for I have tarried long. She looked at me and sighed. As thou wilt, she said at length, submissively. As thou wilt, so thou dost come again. Thou wilt come? If my master sends, I answered. Duh. And as I spoke, I moved towards the door, for I longed to leave her. He will do so, she said, with a trace of her old mocking manner. Farewell, then, Cesario, until we meet again. My hand was on the door. With a sudden, sweeping movement, she was beside me, and ere I was aware of her intention, she kissed me lightly upon the mouth. I have kissed thee on the lips, she whispered. Has woman ever done the like before? Remember, I have sealed thee mine. Farewell, Cesario, my love, my love. Blindly, I opened the door and fled along the corridor, down the staircase, and thence into the street. How I found my way I never knew, but at length, when I had in some measure recovered my self-possession, I was at the Blackfriars landing. I stood a moment or two striving to collect my thoughts, but, finding the task a vain one, I hailed a boat and started to return to the Globe. My mind was in a turmoil. Here was a coil, indeed. The Countess was in love with me, or rather, with my disguise. What should I do? Were it wiser to let the comedy go on? Look at this. A little heart inside a heart. Or should I declare myself and end it forthwith? Is this the right page? I think it is. Yeah, it is, because it's got the big heart. And end it forthwith. When I reached the theater, the problem was still unsolved, and with a shrug, I dismissed it from my thoughts. Time must disentangle the situation. 'Twas too hard a knot for me to untie. Woo! Lesbian action with Anne Hathaway. All right, bruv. Goodbye. Goodbye.